In a city like Hong Kong, there's a lot of critics of the way in which the government handles economic policy. Critics say it constrains entrepreneurs rather than enables them, that it directs taxpayer money to pet projects. How do you answer the critics?
I would say that the critics' statement about Hong Kong not being innovative enough to foster entrepreneurship is not backed by facts. Looking at startup where they usually start at incubators or co-work space, just 3 years ago we only have, it's just starting, I have 3 co-work space in Hong Kong. Today we have about 31 of them in different locations. Just recently there are 1,065 startups in Hong Kong, according to a survey done by Invest Hong Kong. And 60% are local startups, and 40% of them are from overseas. A lot of them from Israel and other places, Silicon Valley and from Europe. They scale up quite quickly to be of a global presence and leading actually in development as well as in manufacturing. And we tap into the resources elsewhere. In Shenzhen, for example, in the Pearl River Delta. And from a policy perspective, we pour a lot of resources into helping our innovation. You must have an environment conducive to it to foster more entrepreneurship. Therefore, the protection and trading of intellectual property rights is very, very important.
The general perception is that China, fairly or unfairly, it can only replicate. It cannot innovate. How do you change that perception? How do you change that view? And why is it important that China is seen as an innovator?
这呢也是我们非常关心的一个问题。我们发展快实际上是从创新和拷贝是2个阶段。第一个阶段就是我们前10几年基本上是学习引进合资为主。这样的话呢，但是我们引进合资呢也是尊重知识产权的。我曾经在全国做过调查。大部分我们引进合资拷贝的都是过期的专利，少数的呢，这个也有拷贝的，不太遵守知识产权，这样的中央政府都对了坚决的处理和打击和保护。我们30多年的改革开放的实践证明，差距大的时候，引进是一条捷径，就拷贝引进。你稍微有发展以后，你的竞争对手认为你的发展影响他的发展。这个时候你再引进，依赖引进，那就是自毁前程。所以只能是靠自主创新，靠创新。从2006年开始，我们制定了70多个政策，严格的尊重，包括尊重知识产权，支持创新。科技园区里边每几秒钟就有一个新公司，3分钟就有一个 idea 出现，这些都是这个过去没有的。我们去年的园区里的这个创新企业交的税收是1万多亿，总的产值达到了20万亿。我们起步的时候只有70亿。我们这个知识产权的进步是全世界最快的。为什么会出现这样的问题？大家还是觉得我们是拷贝呢？就是中国的创新，中国的声音，这个因为我们在国际话语权还比较弱，外头不了解我们是怎么回事，所以中国声音在国外还不够响亮。中国的声音在与我们中国的发展的实际情况不匹配，所以因此造成这样。所以这个呢，我们也需要就是让世界了解中国文化。
Does government really have a role at the heart of innovation when invention is essentially about individual enterprise and individual ambition?
Technical innovations are never done with by governments, of course. But I would also say that successful technical innovation system cannot be done without governments. Sweden, we have a history of nowadays well-known international companies such as IKEA, Ericsson, Atlas Copco, Tetra Pak, etc., etc. That was a result of a conducive environment for innovations made by governments over decades. Now, we have a challenge before us mentioned by the Minister Kaplan that is probably, as I used to describe it, the challenge of mankind. And urbanization currently 100 million people per year, out of which China, India, and Indonesia accounts for 30 million. 80% today of economic activities, greenhouse gases, etc., is produced in an urban environment. We all know that. The challenge is how to make an increased urban share of an increasing world population sustainable, environmentally, socially, etc., etc. That will require innovations at a level we probably not have seen. The Swedish government has announced and is about to set up a special innovation council. And one would ask, how could a governmental innovation council help anything in that direction? But the idea is to involve, of course, the industry, the academia, and other relevant stakeholders to see to how can priorities be made, how can resources be allocated, how can bottlenecks be widened, as far as that is political tools needed.
Israel manages to turn many military originated technologies into commercially viable applications. They are seen as military technologies that are in some way instruments of the state. How do you stop that being the perception of them and have them adopted and accepted into people's lives?
Our day-to-day lives are reflected and affected by the fact that we are surrounded by enemy states. All of the Israeli men and women are actually obliged to serve in the army at the age of 18. And many of those soldiers, men and women, go to technological units. Many of those, actually, after they complete their service, go as small units to those Block 71 replicas that we do have in Israel, those incubators, those startup hubs, and create their own ideas for civilian use. Most of the people learn in the army is to think outside of the box, to be relevant, to think ahead, or a few steps ahead. The major role of governments in the 2000 and this year, 2015, and looking into the future, is pretty much not to interfere, to make sure we're not interrupting the private sector, the young people, the men and women.
Making it happen and having a plan is very much at the heart of Singapore. How much time of the government is committed to thinking about how to reinvent itself as a state?
How much time?
Yeah.
All the time. So every single day. There's a lot of support at the policy level. I think what's important is how do you implement that and make sure the distribution of the funds is effectively allocated to areas where gaps are closed and results and outcome is desirable for a country like Singapore and for our economy, and to make sure that we position ourselves effectively. Right now, we're trying to be a global entrepreneurship hub, innovation center, and trying to attract as many talents as we can into Singapore, as many startups as we can into Singapore. So right now, we embark on a plan. It's a smart nation plan, smart city. We're trying to build Singapore into a smart city where you simply put, imagine putting sensors all over Singapore, and then you could get big data and do analytics and then understand how we can run our city more efficiently, keep the streets clean and the housings and issues, municipal issues are resolved very quickly. We're progressing to that stage. That's as innovative as we can get as a government, but to make that happen, the private sector needs to come in, the investors need to come in, startups and multinational companies with the IP and the skill sets that can make that happen. So the government really just coordinates these resources. Yeah. Okay. A lot of Singapore's success today is because we learn from our valued partners in China, Israel, Hong Kong. We learn from everyone. We learn from the US and Europeans, and we bring it in and say how we can do it better.
How important is it to be moving up the innovation rankings? How important is it to be number one?
Absolutely. I think innovation is really the way of the future. You always have to look over your shoulder to see what is the next trend and really stay up the value chain. I think that's the way that's the only way we could progress.
Well, that's not our ambition. We do many innovation for our survival and for self-sufficiency. Indexes and all, they change every time. And then if it's different publication and different surveys, then you change again. So we hope that Singapore can always be part of that process, part of that ranking in that sense, but never try to be, say, number one. I think if we can be number one, but we don't have enough jobs for people, don't have enough startups, it's not a vibrant place for people who want to come in, I think it's just, to us, it doesn't achieve our national objectives.
Pretty much the same answer. We need to follow up the relevant trends, always look 2-3 steps ahead in terms of what is the next challenge. To answer the challenges of this era and decade, mostly in terms of climate issues, food security, and other measures. And if we will stay in the same company as these distinguished countries, we will be sufficient.
因此，我们极力在打造一个一流的创新的环境和制度的环境，使我们更多的中国的年轻人能够在这一次未来的创造中实现中国梦而奋斗。
It's important for us as a small, extremely export-oriented country to remain high up. That's a survival condition. Probably even more important to be able to develop the ability to combine innovations to systems and to a systems approach to really take on the great challenges we have had.